Hello, everybody. My name again is Walter Higgins. I'm in the Water Division here at EPA Region 3. I'm the Technical Assistance Lead here in the region. So today we're going to discuss how EPA Region 3 is assisting communities with drinking water and wastewater challenges. We provide technical assistance, or TA, you may hear that acronym, to these communities. The term water TA is essentially our program for providing water-related technical assistance to these communities. Next. So kind of just going back to the basics here. So most drinking water comes from our streams or well water. So well water would be deep in the ground, maybe hundreds of feet in the ground. So this water is then treated by professional water operators to be safe to drink, essentially. On the other hand, something we may not want to think about is our sewage. Our sewage is mostly collected in pipes in the streets and taken to a treatment facility to be treated for pathogens and many other contaminants. The end product is clean water that's usually discharged to a stream. Both drinking water and wastewater treatment is obviously extremely important to public health and also the environment. Lastly, I really want to send a shout out to our professional wastewater and water operators who operate and maintain these really sophisticated systems 24/7, Christmas, New Year's, getting calls in the middle of the night. We have to thank them for the hard work they do. Next. The bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, you may hear that here and there throughout the presentation. Bill provides a significant increase in funding opportunities for communities. Bill also allows EPA to significantly ramp up our technical assistance programs, with the main goal in helping disadvantaged and also, help disadvantaged communities access this bill funding through the state revolving fund programs. So if you're not familiar with the state revolving fund programs, this is a state program, hence state revolving fund, that provides low-cost financing, kind of like a bank, to municipalities for mostly water infrastructure projects. The state revolving fund program receives EPA grants annually to add essentially to their program. In addition, we have the additional bill funding substantially increases the EPA funds going to these states annually. EPA and our state counterparts are really working harder than ever to make sure underserved and disadvantaged communities are able to access this bill funding. Next. The bipartisan infrastructure law provides $50 billion in new funding for water infrastructure. So it's a huge amount of funding for water infrastructure. And the main goal of this technical assistance program we're talking about today is to help communities access this funding. Next. So some communities need a lot of help, some communities need just a little bit of help. And that's what this program is here for. The plan is to help communities identify these water challenges, plan for solutions, increase community engagement, build technical, financial, and managerial capacity, and also ultimately develop funding application materials to access this infrastructure funding. So depending on where you're at, you may be in the beginning of these efforts, you may be toward the end, but we're here to help in any of these capacity. Next. So this graphic shows the core technical assistance programs. On the right is our base programs, or like our normally funded technical assistance programs. The multimedia means basically not just water, it's funding for other types of media or programs like air protection, things like that. Office of Wastewater Management has a rural, small, and tribal wastewater TA program. The Office of Groundwater and Drinking Water has a training and technical assistance program for small systems. The Office of Water, if you click on this link here, you could see a lot of other programs that we have out of our Office of Water. Now to the left is the substantial increase in technical assistance programs we have thanks to the bill funding. Next. The environmental finance centers have been awarded a substantial amount of funding to assist these disadvantaged and underserved communities with their challenges. There are many EFCs across the nation. $100 million in bill funding has been secured for the EFCs, with the capacity of another $52 million in additional funding for the multimedia technical assistance. Next. So this is a graphic of all the regional environmental finance centers that are going to be providing technical assistance. So University of Maryland, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, is our local or regional environmental finance center. Next. And the EFCs that were selected at the national level with the bill funding is RCAP, or Rural Community Assistance Partnership, EPIC, U.S. Water Alliance, and Moonshot Missions. So the roles of the national EFCs are to assist the regional EFCs, and also maybe there's specialized areas that we need certain types of support where they can kind of fill the gaps essentially. Next. So these are the really wide range of services that the EFCs can provide: planning and assessment, project development, partnerships and engagement, funding and financing, and program management. So you can see this is a huge list of services that are available, and obviously based on the community's needs. Next. So how do you access this technical assistance? So you could either get a hold of one of the regional EFCs, or EPA has an online request form, and I'll give you a link to that on the next slide. But I just wanted to emphasize EPA, the states, and the EFCs are proactively trying to identify communities that may not be aware of this program. Again, the focus is on disadvantaged and underserved communities. Next. This is the link to that online request form. So epa.gov/water-TA. So it's easy to remember, but you'll have that in the slides. Next. Lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to EPA and our state partners' existing technical assistance teams. So we're out there often providing technical assistance and hands-on training and coaching to water and wastewater operators. We're doing this all the time, so I wanted to give a shout out to the team. This is a picture of myself at the bottom doing training in Sunbury, PA at the wastewater plant in their shop. And then my colleague, Mark Neville from Pennsylvania DEP, doing the lab portion of the training. So that's all I have right now. I wanted to thank everybody for your time, and I'm going to introduce Jen Cotting from the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate it. I am here with my colleague, Bree Callahan from the Water Center at Penn. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk about the water technical assistance, or water TA as we shorten it up, that we are going to be delivering over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So if you're not familiar with us, the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center is part of a national network of centers that help communities find a way to pay for the natural resource protection and restoration activities that they've identified as local priorities. Our center serves EPA Region 3, obviously covering the Mid-Atlantic states. Our center's been around for 30 years, so we have a pretty long history of supporting communities on their drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and source water needs. I've been around, I'm currently the director, but I've been around the center for about 20 years now, working with communities on water resource management and green infrastructure. Next slide, please. Bree, do you want to give folks an introduction to you and to the Water Center?
Sure. So the Water Center at Penn is located at the University of Pennsylvania campus. We're a community-focused research center working to identify integrated solutions to the challenges facing watersheds and water systems, whether they're built or natural. And we do this by using a community-led research approach. We work alongside communities, bringing our knowledge and expertise to the solutions addressing these water challenges. And we're sharing, the whole point is sharing power and responsibility and encouraging communities to take the lead in determining their priorities, the questions to be asked, and the approach to answering these questions. So we share resources, education, training, and applied knowledge to support the community's goals. Our work facilitating connections and conversations among these stakeholders and developing the capacity to create and implement their own solutions has resulted in best practices that can be replicated for use in other communities and adapted for use by broader water sector audiences. So we continue to use these best practices to engage the Penn community and the expertise that we have available to us and external stakeholders through collaborative programming, publications, outreach, research opportunities, and inspiring Penn and area high school students to pursue water studies and careers in the water sector. So we really have three strategic focus areas. One is water equity. The second is water leadership, kind of touching on the water leaders and addressing workforce development challenges that I just talked about a second ago, and then building community climate resilience. So that's the Water Center in a nutshell.
So next slide, please. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction to the Water Center, Bree. So as Walter indicated, in addition to our EFC having been serving as a multimedia EFC for the last 30 years, last fall, we were also designated as the Water Infrastructure EFC for the Mid-Atlantic region. As Walter mentioned, there are 13 of these water infrastructure EFCs across the country, all part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is, again, the most unprecedented investment in water systems in our history of our nation. The centers are charged with helping communities access federal and state funding to address water infrastructure needs. And that includes the dollars that are coming from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the other pots of money that are out there, and with a particular focus on underserved and disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. So our goals, through this water TA program, our team is really looking to provide direct support to municipalities and tribes and water utilities in the region as they are seeking to implement water infrastructure improvements, right? So this includes helping communities identify their challenges, develop plans to address those challenges, help build up their technical, financial, and managerial capacity to manage those challenges and implement those plans. And then to, when it's appropriate, to help them develop funding applications to the state revolving funds or to other grant programs that might be appropriate to support implementation of these plans that get developed, right? This project specifically is targeting, again, underserved and disadvantaged communities, but also communities that just have never accessed the SRFs before or are not currently receiving a similar kind of technical assistance. So really trying to reach those folks that we haven't been able to reach before. And then, like other water TA providers across the country, we're working towards the end goal of increasing the number of communities who have access to infrastructure funding. We really want to make sure that we're building communities that have safe, reliable water systems. Next slide, please. So Bree and Bree's team at the Water Center and our team at the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center are joined by a number of other folks who are on our team. We want to, as Walter's graphic indicated, this is really soup to nuts sorts of delivery of services. And so we knew we were going to need a team with a diverse skill set. As you can see from the graphic here, we have a number of the RCAP regional centers that serve the Mid-Atlantic as a part of our team. They have a long history of working with small, rural, and remote communities. So we thought that was that, they know what they're doing in that regard. And so we really want to be able to lean on them when appropriate for the smaller rural communities that are struggling with water system challenges. We have Moonshot Missions as a part of our team. They have really strong technical and engineering skill set. We've got Quantified Ventures as a part of our team who has really deep knowledge of the state revolving fund system and how to navigate and develop applications that'll be, strong applications to those programs. And then we also have the University of Maryland's Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health. And those are the folks that we work with across projects that the EFC does to really make sure that we are not forgetting that equity lens, that we are developing programs and delivering technical assistance that is culturally aware and competent. Next slide, please. Excellent. So our approach to providing this technical assistance, and we really capture it in these three principles. We're providing direct water technical assistance to communities. That means we're going beyond one-time workshops and webinars and trainings. Those things are very helpful, but what we're anticipating doing is really having direct interactions with the water utilities and communities, really developing an assessment, really understanding where they are, what they believe their challenges are, what they believe good pathways to solutions will be, and working hand in hand with them to develop a plan or a roadmap forward that will really help move the needle for them in terms of being better able to address their water infrastructure needs. We also want to do that in a way that's culturally competent. We want to make sure we're engaging the broader community. We really need to understand not just the municipal staff or the utility staff's understanding of what the challenges are, but really understanding the broader community sense of what the challenges are and how they would like to see those challenges addressed. Second, we're looking to support communities in taking concrete steps towards accessing water infrastructure funding. We want to stay focused on putting these communities on a path for accessing infrastructure funding. To make sure this happens, we'll be working with EPA and with the state SRF programs to identify communities to receive assistance. We'll be conducting that initial outreach to assess each community's needs, exactly where they are and being able to address them, what kind of capacity they have, developing that work plan for each community, and then again, as appropriate, helping them develop funding applications, whether that be to the SRF programs or to other programs that are available. And then finally, we recognize there are a lot of players providing water TA in the landscape within our region, within the states in our region, and obviously nationally as well. So we want to make sure that we are coordinating and collaborating with those other folks. We want to make sure that we're avoiding duplication of efforts. We want to make sure that the work that we're doing is value added and that we're not at odds with our fellow water technical assistance providers. We also recognize that there are other initiatives, for example, the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers and the national EFCs. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with them as well. We want to minimize the burden to the communities that we are engaging, and we want to minimize the burden to our state folks as well, to make sure that they're not, 5 or 6 of us knocking on all the same doors or calling all the same phone lines. And then we also want to make sure that our solutions are really community centered. And this is sort of reemphasizing some of the points that I've made in this slide so far, that the local plans that we're developing are really not just in partnership with the states, tribes, and territories, but with also the local governments and the community organizations themselves. And we know that that's going to require, for the communities that we haven't worked with in the past. We recognize this is going to take a fair amount of trust building, especially as we're trying to reach the hardest to reach communities. We also are going to be proactive about this. There are communities that have come to us already, which is wonderful, but we recognize that that's probably going to be not going to be the majority of pathway of how communities get in touch with us. You know, we're actively identifying, using EJ Screen, using other types of metrics, using the underserved community analysis that some of the states have done already, and we'll be proactively reaching out to those communities or to the folks that are already trusted voices in those communities, so that we can be of service and not be sticking our nose in where we don't belong. Next slide, please. This is that same menu of services slide that is similar to what Walter showed you. The expectation is that we either through our centers or through our fellow partners on this team, or through the technical assistance bench of more engineering and consulting firms that we've vetted to cover any needs that we may not be able to address in-house, doing everything from the planning and assessment, the project development, the partnerships and engagement, the funding and the financing, and construction management. We recognize that some communities may only need help in one particular area some might need help across the entire process. And so, we'll be tailoring our technical assistance accordingly. This is a 5-year project. We will be working with approximately 40 to 60 communities a year, with about 10 of those being deep dive, like really intensive technical assistance, and with the others being lighter touch technical assistance. And again, of course, with the goal of maximizing the number of underserved communities that have access to those infrastructure dollars. Next slide, please. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Bree and let her talk about Avondale, which is a community where we're already doing this kind of technical assistance. We thought it might be helpful to hear a real live sort of case study about of how this rolls out and what kind of services the community is benefiting from. So Bree, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. So I'd like to tell you a story about Avondale. Avondale is a tiny borough in Chester County, Pennsylvania, with a population of about 1,300 people. It's majority Spanish speaking. Many of the residents are connected to the mushroom farming industry, which is a huge economic driver for this part of Chester County, and where 60% of all mushrooms in the United States are grown. So Avondale's water systems, drinking water and wastewater, serve about 350 customers, and they run both of them through their public works department. It's not through an authority structure at all. The borough has a staff of 2 full-time equivalents, a treasurer and an administrator, and the water utilities are managed with a contracted public works part-time person and a part-time contract engineer who runs the treatment facilities. So as you can imagine, this doesn't translate to a lot of capacity. The Water Center has been working with Avondale for many years on stormwater management and their MS4 permit. So with the passage of the IIJA and BIL that Walter and Jen were talking about earlier, we met with the Borough Council, the new mayor, and the staff to help them understand the water infrastructure funding that's available and that their community should be eligible for the subsidies or principal forgiveness outlined in the legislation. So based on what we learned from working with Avondale and boroughs throughout Pennsylvania, we know that Avondale is not unique, but representative really of what many of the boroughs are facing. Among the things that we learned is that the staff didn't have access to digitized maps for the water systems. They were able to identify paper maps. So as part of the technical assistance, we've been working with the Southwest Environmental Finance Center to get those maps digitized. Our next step in this case is to get out into the field to locate the water system's assets and really ground truth and complete the mapping. So we'll be doing this using an affordable GPS unit and an iPad that will have software on it to collect field information. Another thing that was brought up in the context of our discussions was the borough has a great concern for leakage in the systems, which they know because treatment volumes go up significantly during storm events. and that there are less drinking water reaching homes than when it's treated. So there's leaking out of the pipes. So we're identifying where there are leakages, and that's pretty much one of the highest priorities right now. One of the other things that came up is that the borough is facing significant flooding issues. For example, there's an apartment building in the floodplain, which 25% of the residents that live in the building, and when it floods, all of them have to leave because the mechanicals are on the lower level. So it's extremely disruptive. So for Avondale, our broader approach is really to look across their stormwater, drinking water, and wastewater and flooding challenges to integrate the water management and identify the most urgent issues and solutions that might deliver multiple benefits across these challenge areas. So really the takeaway here is that if you look at the menu of services, we take a look at what the current situation of the borough is and what their needs are, and the technical assistance going forward is not going to be sequential across the menu of services, but it's really going to be tailored to the individual community needs and priorities. So that's sort of a basic snapshot of what technical assistance could look like.
Okay, so next slide, please, which I think is our wrap up here. Again, Jen Cotting and our lead at the Penn Water Center is Ellen Kohler. And so there's our contact information. If this is something that's interesting to you, if that's something you want to learn more about, we'd be happy to, we're an email or a phone call away, happy to talk to you about this some more. Also happy to take any questions that our audience might have.
I am seeing one question from Philip in the chat. It says, can multiple municipalities fall under one TA application?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's something that we'd really like to be able to do. We think that, it's a lot of times it's just terribly inefficient for municipalities, particularly smaller municipalities that are in close proximity to one another, to be trying to address all these challenges individually. It can be terribly inefficient. And so being able to coordinate across multiple municipalities is something we'd be very interested in supporting. I think, we've done a fair amount of that work, particularly in the stormwater arena, but it's certainly appropriate to any of the water infrastructure resources that we've been talking about today. And I think, there's some efficiencies that are gained and can reduce the cost to each individual municipality when they're working together. So we'd love to talk more about that.
Great, thanks, Jen, and thanks, Philip, for the question. I'm seeing another question. Is there a role for community watershed organization or other local citizens group to assist you in connecting with their local municipality or in helping identify needs in their local communities?
I don't want to be the only voice jumping in and answering these questions, but I would say certainly. I think in a lot of communities, it's those citizens groups or community-based organizations or these watershed organizations that have been in these communities on the ground working on these issues for a long time, who are already a trusted voice in that community. It's certainly far more trusted than the University of Maryland wandering in and saying, hi, we're here to help. So I think to the extent that we can work with those organizations and those groups to identify communities and the needs that, the needs that those communities are facing, I think that would be a really valuable avenue for reaching the municipal governments.
All right, seems like that might be it for questions. Anything you'd like to say to wrap up before we move on to the next presentation?
Just very much appreciate the opportunity to chat with everyone today. And again, we're an email or a phone call away if there are additional questions or opportunities arise. If Philip wants to talk to us about multi-municipal stuff, or if Tally wants to talk to us about engaging watershed organizations, we're all for it. We'd love to hear from you.